All right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Ephraim. Today's date is October 5th, 2022. And I'm saying Ahaya by Yeshem, Yeshua, HaMashiach, Baruch Atah Adonai. And if you listen to the sound of my voice, you will blessed to see another day. And for that, all praise, honor, and glory is due to the Most High God of Israel. All right, well, I hope everyone's been having a pretty good and productive day so far today. Pretty much over for a lot of us, for a lot of you. I thought about what I was going to teach today, and just kind of dropped in my spirit that, because I know the other day I made a presentation, and I said I was going to kind of take it back to where it all began for us with this whole E1B1A DNA movement, right? And I don't know, as you know, many have come and gone to the wayside. You know, some are still here there was, with me from way back in the day to now, or whatever. Even the ones who aren't here, God bless them. God bless you all. But I received a lot of pushback, and not just from, it's to be expected from certain people, but from my own people, trying to attack me and trying to attack my credentials. What are my credentials? Am I a DNA expert? All this kind of stuff. And that basically, that's a thing when people want to try to discredit you. They go to, try to point to anything to try to discredit what you're saying because they don't like what you're saying or they don't believe what you're saying. So, and somehow if they can discredit you, they can make what you're saying, null and void or whatever. But, I know what it is, right? And from the very start, I said, listen, because you won't find out one man and a man of God in the Bible who the Most High called that has a degree. Okay, let's just cut the madness out. You won't. Christ, neither the 12 disciples, none of them had a so-called college degree. They were called by God, and they all had all the men of God had missions. Even Jonah. Even though he tried to escape it, and he was proof positive you cannot escape the will of God. God's will be done. That's what we pray, right? And so His will be done. So anyway, I got a lot of pushback, a lot of detractors, a lot of disrespect, a lot of I thought that was going to be our shining moment. The Most High raised one of us up to uncover the DNA of the children of Israel. I thought that everyone would be excited and happy. Now we have genetic proof now who the Bible says we are, but it didn't go like that for the most part, and then people just started kind of stealing my lessons, stealing my teachings, the E1B1A and masquerading it off as their own. Just all kinds of dishonorable stuff. So I said, you know what? I came up on this one young man. He's an Israeli. He was born and raised in Israel, and he has a degree in genetics. Matter of fact, he has a PhD in molecular biology, and he is an Israeli DNA expert. And man, this young brother did a serious test about the DNA for the people of Israel, the people that occupy Israel now. And when he came out with his findings, man, y'all thought I was attacked. This guy has a PhD in molecular biology. It just goes to show, it doesn't matter what your so-called credentials are to man. It's not about your credentials. It's about them trying to discredit what you're saying. That's all it is. It's not about your credentials. This young man, and I'm gonna give you a briefing on who he is, give you a little briefing on that. Then we're gonna get into to his findings with his DNA test and what he found, and but they can't really phase him. He's airtight, but they still tried. His book, he came out with a book about it, and it was actually #1 in Israel. Basically, in a nutshell, saying, listen, man, the people that live here that call themselves Israelites or Israelis or whatever, they're not from here. they're not from this region. He actually put it out there. I said, so listen, don't take my word for it or whatever. Now, he didn't really speak on as far as who the children of Israel are and all that, but he told the world who the people that occupy Israel today, like who they are and who they aren't and where they came from. And they didn't like that. And he's just like, listen, man, it is what it is. So anyway, let's get into that. I'm gonna give you a briefing on this young man's background, and then we're gonna get into it. All right, let's get it. All right, and we are off. His name is Dr. Rhineland Hypothesis, and he's listed as Israeli American, and they say he's a geneticist and an associate professor of bioinformatics at Lund University in Sweden. His research uses computational, statistical, epidemiological, and mathematical approaches to fields such as complex disorders, population genetics, personalized medicine, molecular evolution, genomics, paleogenomics, and epigenetics. Hey, listen, this cat he's the truth. Okay, it says after completing undergraduate studies in Israel, he obtained a PhD in molecular evolution under the supervision of Dan Khazar at the University of Houston in 2009, followed by postdoctoral research fellowships at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine and School of Public Health. In 2011, the Genographic Project, after concerns emerged about the retention of private genetic data on individuals in survey populations, hired Hypothesis and asked him to design a method that would enable analysis to extract only historical information from the accumulating genomic evidence of populations in such a way that individuals' right to keep their private health profile was collected from individuals. All right. And it says, in the field of molecular evolution, Hypothesis worked on the compositional domain model that describes the compositional organization of animal genomes. Let's see here, and then let's get to the good stuff. All right, it says, in the field of population genetics, Hypothesis has published papers analyzing the ancestries of European Jews, including work related to the Khazar hypothesis of Ashkenazi ancestry. And real quick, the Khazar hypothesis is it's often called the Khazar myth by its critics. It is largely abandoned historical hypothesis. The hypothesis postulated that Ashkenazi Jews were primarily, or to a large extent, descended from Khazars, a multi-ethnic conglomerate of mostly Turkic people who formed a semi-nomadic Khanate in and around the northern and central Caucasus and the Pontic Caspian steppe. The hypothesis also postulated that after the collapse of the Khazar Empire, the Khazars fled to Eastern Europe and made up a large part of the Jews there. The hypothesis draws on some medieval sources such as the Khazar correspondence, according to which at some point in the 8th and 9th centuries, a small number of Khazars were said by Judah Halevi and Abraham ibn Daud to have converted to Rabbinic Judaism. The scope of the conversion within the Khazars remain uncertain, but the evidence used to tie the Ashkenazi community to the Khazars is meager and subject to conflicting interpretations. And this is the Khazar hypothesis. Genetic studies on Jews have found no substantive evidence of a Khazar origin among Ashkenazi Jews. Doron Behar and other geneticists have concluded that such a link is unlikely, noting that it is difficult to test the Khazar hypothesis using genetics because there is lack of clear modern descendants of the Khazars that could prove a clear test of the contribution to Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry, but found no genetic markers in Ashkenazi Jews that would link them to peoples of the Caucasus Khazar area. Right. So anyway, I had to give y'all the briefing on what that was when I mentioned that for Mr. Hypothesis. That's what they call his work related to the Khazar hypothesis. That's what they're talking about. So it's a contentious subject that has received media attention. That's why I had to tell y'all what it was. Hypothesis argues for a non-Levantine origin of the Ashkenazis and favors the hypothesis that they are of mixed Irano-Turco-Slavic and Southern European descent. Most of Hypothesis' population genetic research uses the GPS, or geographic population structure, algorithm designed by him and co-authors. Hypothesis himself initially contacted Harry Osterer, who, along with most other scientists in the field, proposes that the Jews are genetically related and relatively homogeneous. In order to obtain permission to access the databases used by Oster and by his colleagues to establish their result, Oster was willing to share his data provided that Elhike submit a proposal showing that the project met several criteria, including that it be non-defamatory nature toward the Jewish people, which Elhike viewed as evidence or bias, and which pediatrician Catherine DeAngelis called peculiar. Elhike has said that while his paper has attracted attention of anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic white supremacists, his intention was not to disprove a connection to biblical Jews, but rather to eliminate the racist underpinnings of anti-Semitism in Europe. All right, so that's give you a backdrop on this Dr. Elhike, and now we're going to get into the meat of his studies and what he found, and what he came to logical conclusions of about the Jews of today. Okay, the story starts out saying, quote, "Scientists usually don't call each other liars and frauds, but that's how Johns Hopkins University postdoctoral researcher Eran Elhike describes a group of widely respected geneticists, including Harry Osterer, professor of pathology and genetics at Yeshiva University's Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and author of the 2012 book Legacy, A Genetic History of the Jewish People. For years now, the finding of Osterer and several other scientists have stood virtually unchallenged on the genetics of Jews and the story they tell of the common Middle East origins shared by many Jewish populations worldwide. Jews and Ashkenazism in particular are indeed one people, Osterer's research finds." That is extremely not true. He goes on to say, "It's a theory that more or less affirms the understanding that many Jews themselves hold of who they are in the world, a people who, though scattered," it's scattered, okay. "Though scattered, share an ethnic racial bond rooted in their common ancestral descent from the indigenous Jews of ancient Judea or Palestine, as the Romans called it after they conquered the Jewish homeland." See. Oster's theory is sometimes marshaled to lend the authority of science to the Zionist narrative, which views the migration of modern-day Jews to what is now Israel and their rule over the land as a simple act of repossession by the descendants of the land's original residents. Osterer declined to be interviewed for this story. Yeah, of course he would. But in his writings, Osterer points out the dangers of such reductionism. Some of the same genetic markers common among Jews, he finds, can be found in Palestinians as well. By using sophisticated molecular tools, Feldman, Osterer, and most other scientists in the field have found that Jews are genetically homogeneous. No matter where they live, these scientists say Jews are genetically more similar to each other than to their non-Jewish neighbors, and they have a shared Middle Eastern ancestry. Why do they insist on hanging on to that lie? That is a blatant lie. And these are men of distinction, supposedly, scientists and geneticists with all these advanced degrees, and they know that that's just simply not true. Like, wow. But anyway, let me continue. The geneticist research backs up what is known as the Rhineland Hypothesis. According to this hypothesis, Ashkenazi Jews descended from Jews who fled Palestine after the Muslim conquest in the 7th century and settled in southern Europe. In the late Middle Ages, they moved into Eastern Europe from Germany or the Rhineland. Quote, "Nonsense," said Elhike. A 33-year-old Israeli Jew from Beersheba who earned a doctorate in molecular evolution from the University of Houston. He says nonsense to that. Okay? The son of an Italian man and Iranian woman who met in Israel, Elhike, a dark-haired, compact man, sat down recently for an interview in his bare, narrow cubicle of an office at Hopkins, where he's worked for 4 years. In The Missing Link of Jewish European Ancestry, Contrasting the Rhineland and the Khazarian Hypothesis, published in December, Elhike says he has proved that Ashkenazi Jews' roots lie in the Caucasus, a region at the border of Europe and Asia that lies between the Black and Caspian Seas, not in the Middle East. They are descendants, he argues, of the Khazars, a Turkic people who lived in one of the largest medieval states in Eurasia and then migrated to Eastern Europe in the 12th and 13th centuries. Ashkenazi genes, Elhike added, are far more heterogeneous than Osterer and other proponents of the Rhineland Hypothesis believe. Elhike did find a Middle Eastern genetic marker in DNA from Jews, but he says it could be from Iran, not ancient Judea. Go home, brother. Speak on it. He's just speaking the truth, man. He one of them. He's just out for the truth. He ain't even tripping. Elhike writes that the Khazars converted to Judaism in the 8th century, although many historians believe the only royalty and some members of their aristocracy converted. But widespread conversion by the Khazars is the only way to explain the ballooning of the European Jewish population to 8 million at the beginning of the 20th century from its tiny base in the Middle Ages, Elhike said. Elhike bases his conclusion on an analysis of genetic data published by a team of researchers led by Doron Behar, a population geneticist and senior physician at Israel's Rambam Medical Center in Haifa. Using the same data, Behar's team published in 2010 a paper concluding that most contemporary Jews around the world and some non-Jewish populations from the Levant or Eastern Mediterranean are closely related. Elhike used some of the same statistical tests as Behar and others, but he chose different comparisons. Elhike compared genetic signatures found in Jewish populations with those of modern-day Armenians and Georgians, which he uses as a stand-in for the long-extinct Khazarian because they live in the same area as the medieval state. It's an unrealistic premise, said University of Arizona geneticist Michael Hammer, one of Behar's co-authors of Elhike's paper. Hammer notes that Armenians have Middle Eastern roots, which he says is why they appear to be genetically related to Ashkenazi Jews in Elhike's study. In a news article that accompanied Elhike's journal paper, Shlomo Sand, Shlomo Sand, shout out to Shlomo. Shlomo, that's the homie right there. Shlomo Sand, he's Israeli, he's Jewish. Shlomo Sand, history professor at Tel Aviv in Israel University and author of the controversial book, The Invention of the Jewish People, said the study vindicated his long-held ideas. This is another Jewish brother telling the truth. Quote, he said, it's obvious for me, Sand told the journal, some people, historians, and even scientists turned a blind eye to the truth. Once to say Jews were a race was anti-Semitic. Now to say that they're not a race is anti-Semitic. It's crazy how history plays with us, end quote. The paper has received little coverage in mainstream American media, but it has attracted the attention of anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic white supremacists, Elhike said. Interestingly, while anti-Zionist bloggers have applauded Elhike's work, saying it proves that contemporary Jews have no legitimate claim to Israel, some white supremacists have attacked it. They'll attack anything and anybody. I mean, they attacked Christ. So who are we? Right? So he says, despite what his critics claim, Elhike says he was not out to prove that contemporary Jews have no connection to the Jewish people of the Bible. His primary research focus is the genetics of mental illness, which he explains led him to question the assumption that Ashkenazi Jews are a useful population to study because they're so homogeneous. Elhike says he first read about the Khazarian hypothesis a decade ago in a 1976 book by the late Hungarian-British author Arthur Koestler, The 13th Tribe. If you don't have that book, definitely order that book. Put that in your arsenal, along with The Invention of the Jewish People by Shlomo Sand. Written before scientists had the tools to compare genomes. Koestler, who was Jewish by birth, said his aim in writing the book was to eliminate the racist underpinnings of anti-Semitism in Europe. Same thing that Dr. Elhike said. He says, quote, should this theory be confirmed, the term anti-Semitism would become void of meaning. The book jacket reads, although Koestler's book was generally well reviewed, some skeptics questioned the author's grasp of the history of Khazaria. Graor is not surprised that Elhike has stood up against the clique of scientists who believe that Jews are genetically homogeneous. He enjoys being combative, Graor said. That's what science is. And yeah, that's the end of that. And I'm gonna say this, and get ready to close it out. But shout out to Dr. L. Hike, Dr. Professor Schlantz, Slomo Sand, everyone who's dedicated to telling the truth. Okay, I mean, listen, it's like the elaborate hoax, if you will. It goes so far up, and that's just an example of that. I mean, these are scientists and geneticists with advanced degrees that are hanging on to this life. And this is why people like me, who's not that, come up and I say what I'm saying about the E1B1A and the Negro being the lost children of Israel. It's easy to try to discount me. I'm nowhere near that. I'm not no geneticist, no molecular biologist. But here's a molecular biologist, a person who's a DNA expert saying, listen, it's not true. Jew is not a race. Like, these people did not start in the Middle East. They're from the Caucasus Mountains, man. They're Europeans, and I don't know why they won't embrace the truth. But they're going to hang on to the lie, man. And shout out to brother Iran for holding it down and just basically just telling the truth. He's like he wasn't even setting out to try to prove that they wasn't connected to the biblical Israelites. He was just he was on some other stuff. But this is what he found, and that's what his his research uncovered. And they trying to come against him, but he was like, shit, y'all can't fade me. Unless you got a PhD in molecular biology, like, man, go over there, dude. Like, seriously, like, go over there. You in no position to try to, and that's why he's so believable, because he's coming from a literally a scientific point of view. He's trying to figure out stuff, how to help people, and so he ain't tripping on no biblical Jews and this and that. He's not on that. So that's what makes him even more believable. But anyway, now that I've shared his research with you all, his genetic research on the Jews of today and what he found, let me do my part now and tell you how it all ties into what we got going on over here. So what his research does is it adds credence to the fact that I put out lessons about this, because basically haplogroup J1 is the haplogroup that's generally accepted as a quote-unquote Jewish haplogroup. Okay, follow me now. And most of your Ashkenazi Jews and your Jews that come from where Dr. El Hike says they come from are possessors of J1, that J1 haplotype. You see what I'm saying? Follow me. So what he's basically saying is that accepted J1 haplogroup by the quote unquote powers that be is false, because they're not the biblical Jews. They're not the Hebrew Israelites of the Bible. They're not. That's basically what his research is saying. Haplogroup J1 and some of E1B1B, they said supposedly are is accepted as Jewish as well, and which is kind of crazy, because how could E1B1B be Jewish and E1B1A not? Right? Like come on, like, y'all really need to stop playing. And then remember when in my 3-hour comprehensive E1B1A video I did, back, when it all blew up, and I let it be known what the holy haplotype of the children of Israel were, and I said that E1B1A, I basically called them out at Ancestry.com when they said that Mr. Bennett Greenspan said that he let it slip some of the truth when he said E1B1A was present in small amounts at the start of the ancient Israelite nation. That is a part of their website. I have a screenshot. Like, he can try to change it now and try to say, try to change it up now, but I have a screenshot of it. Like, that's what they said. They let that little tidbit slip. So if E1B1A was present at the start of the ancient Israelite nation, guess what? That is the start of the ancient Israelite nation. That he's telling us without telling the people that E1B1A are the Hebrew Israelites. Light as y'all might take it, quiet as it's kept. That's what that little tidbit says. But see, if you don't know, you don't know. You wouldn't even catch that, because there's no way that E1B1A is present that they're not Israelites. Because back then, and y'all know how the Most High was, but not not mixing with any nations or whatever. So if E1B1A was present, in any kind of amounts at the start of the ancient Israelite nation, E1B1A is male. Well, that tells you that the Hebrew Israelites were E1B1A. So it's hiding in plain view, like they're telling us without telling us the truth. So I just thought that was very, very interesting. So that's what Dr. Elhack, that's what his research does in terms of it disqualifies haplogroup J1 and haplogroup E1B1B as a so-called Jewish. But here's the thing, and I said this before, the reason why the Igbos aren't being going through what they're going through, even though they're kind of close, is because E1B1A, which is all of us, that's what we are, it's not accepted as a Hebrew or a Jewish haplogroup, and therein lies the problem. Okay, we can say all day, we can take to court, we can go to court, we can even prove what the Bible says and how we can identify the people of Israel and by our DNA and but until or unless the power structure changes, right? We just a bunch of people who believe something and whatever, because we don't make the laws. We're not in power yet. We're not, you know what I'm saying? So that's kind of where we are. Haplogroup J1 and some of E1B1B is the accepted so-called Jewish haplogroup. So until that changes, this is where we are somehow, some way. I mean, until we can get them to add the E1B1A up in there. But I mean, why would they do that? Because they know, first of all, a lot of them know who the real children of Israel are, and they know what our haplotype is. That's why they've been changing the goalposts and moving the goalposts and putting out this disinformation with the whole Egyptian thing and all that, trying to confuse them. You know what I'm saying? They're not confusing me, but, and many of you, but that's why they're doing that. You know what I'm saying? Until they can add the E1B1A, that's just where we are. So that's how his research affects what we got going on as far as the E1B1A, because his research basically proves, without him trying to prove, that the Ashkenazi Jews and all those so-called Jews of today, especially the ones that occupy Israel, they're not from the they're not the biblical Jews, basically. And he wasn't even trying to prove that. You know what I'm saying? But that's what he ended up proving. So shout out to him for that. And I kind of wanted to, put it all together so you guys can kind of, understand, exactly what that means for, what we got going on over here. And that's how it affects us. So until that, E1B1A is recognized as the Hebrew Israelites, we'll be Negro and Sub-Saharan. But I mean, it is what it is. All praise due to the Most High God of Israel. But I want to make a correction real quick. Bennett Greenspan was not in charge of Ancestry.com. It was FamilyTreeDNA.com. So I wanted to make that correction before I uploaded the presentation. So my bad on that. But there it is there. I hope you all enjoyed it. Maybe got some inspiration from it, some encouragement, something. But until next time, this is Dr. Ephraim signing off, saying Hayya by Yeshem, Yeshua HaMashiach, Baruch Atu Adonai, Shalom, elect.